Hey everyone, this is Eddus. Recently I have been doing patchworking. I've been using a method that I learned from my grandmother, which I later learned on the internet is called English paper piecing. So anyway, this is how I do the method of English paper piecing, EPP. I am English. I'm not made of paper. So this is my method. I know it's probably, if you know what you're doing, it might be a bit weird, but anyway, this is how I do it. So I have got about 8 or 9 of big patches of this that I'm going to eventually sew together and make a quilt. But this is just the method of putting the patches together. So what you need to do is start off with a standard sized of piece of card that you want all of your patches to be. Generally speaking, it has to be around the same kind of size, each individual bit of card, but it's okay if they're a little bit wonky or a little bit out of shape. But generally speaking, they have to be around the same size, but you don't need to measure them too diligently, I would say. Anyway, I used a lot of recycled cardboard and stuff from mostly packets of tea. So anyway, so the first step after you've got your bit of card is you put the card on the fabric that you want to use for the patch. Make sure you have a really good margin around the edge of where the patch is going to be, so that you can do what you're going to do later. So what you need to do is cut a good amount of margin around the edge of the patch, like so that you have enough space for what you're going to do next. Put the piece of card on the inside, on the kind of underside of the patch. Fold the edges around the patch as if you're folding or wrapping a Christmas present. What you need to do is you need to make sure that the folds and the edges are very smooth and sharp and nicely turned out, and then pin all of these folds so they hold and look smart and not loose. It needs to be quite tight and uniform, like that. So yeah, so each of these folds, it's good to have a uniform number at each of the points of, if you're doing a hexagon, etc. Next up, you need to sew all of these points, these folds up, like so. So what I do is I use embroidery thread, because I've got lots of it. So just sew up each of these folded over points. Usually you can use the same one kind of length of thread, like I did here. It just goes all the way around from the top, all the way around, kind of counterclockwise. Just sew very neatly on down each of these folds. Then you've got your first patch. I have quite a few patches, as you can see. I've done this quite a few times. At this point, it might seem strange, but you leave the cardboard in for a bit longer. And then next up, you're going to get a selection of patches together in an arrangement that you like, in an arrangement that looks nice to you, and then you're going to sew them together to make a bigger patch. You will need to sew all of these edges together, as I'm showing you very expertly with my finger and my pair of scissors. So each of these edges that touch will need to be sewn together. So here's the first edge that you'll need to sew together. You can tackle this in any order you like, really. Just be creative and have fun with it. Here's a closer look of the edge. It's good to line up the corners of the hexagon edges, if you see what I mean. So those two lips go together. And then you have an edge that, even if it's not completely straight and completely the same length, it kind of fits together okay. So then you sew up this edge. You need to sew up in between the space where the card finishes and where the overlap of the fabric is. You'll be able to, you'll get a feel for it as you do it. So there we go. So you've sewn up your first edge, and you can open it out, and now you have the beginnings of a patchwork quilt. So next up, we're going to sew in together the first patch that I made at the beginning. It's very exciting. So here again, I'm showing how you put the edges together. Those lips at the ends need to kind of match up so that you have those two edges at the top. And there we go. And then you just sew across. It's very easy, simple, basic sewing stitch. You don't need to be too fancy because no one will see the back of this, and it needs to be simple and strong, not like fancy in any way. Anyway, here's some sewing action. So what I decided to do here was I went along, and then I decided to run the thread back to the center again so I could just keep sewing, which is a good way of reinforcing the stitches, but also just not wasting thread. So anyway, you can see it can be a bit difficult sometimes to get the thread through because there's not that much space in between the edge and where the cardboard is. But if you go through the cardboard with the thread, that's fine. That's not a problem. So now I'm going to you can see how with these edges, they don't quite fit perfectly, and that's totally fine. You just need to sew them up, and in the grand scheme of things, the quilt itself will look fine. So anyway, here I am. I'm just sewing up this last edge. It's just a very basic sewing stitch. You see, as I'm going along, I'm kind of pushing the card back in and lining up a bit as I go along the stitch so it doesn't kind of wobble and doesn't get a bit off kilter. If it gets a little off kilter, it's fine, because that's kind of the nature of anything that's handmade. So, just still sewing. Make sure the thread doesn't get caught on any of the other threads like it did just there. That happens sometimes, and it's fine. There we go. I've done the first 3 patches of a patchwork quilt. So here on the back you can see where I started there, and I went up, down, up again, and went along, up, down, along again. And now we've got 3 patches that are sewn together. It's exciting, isn't it? So anyway, this is what it looks like from the back once I've sewn all the patches together in a nice cluster. You can see I've done quite uniform stitches, but it doesn't need to be too neat, really, as long as you feel strong and confident in the stitches. It's fine if you can see the stitches on the right side of things. That's just the nature of something that's handmade, and I'm happy to see that kind of human touch on something that I've made, so it doesn't bother me too much. So yes, this is the beginning of how you do an English paper piecing quilt. This is the back end of one of my large quilt's edges, my large quilt pieces. So you can see how the sewing kind of goes along all of the edges. It's exciting, isn't it? Anyway, and this is the nice end. So basically, this technique you can just continue on and on forever and ever, really. You can make it as big as you like. And that's what I'm doing. I haven't finished mine yet. This is my first one. So once I get to the end, I'll let you know. Okay, I hope this has been useful for everybody. Thank you for watching. Take care.